In a busy park in a large city in the United States, life pulsed at a frenetic pace. People hurried past, each one immersed in their daily concerns. Among them, a middle-aged man stood out, not because of his ordinary appearance, but because of the melancholic presence he emanated. Jack, with his disheveled hair and threadbare clothes, sat on a worn wooden bench, his guitar resting on his legs. He was not just a beggar. He was a lost musician, trying to find a space in the world through his strings. Deftly, he began to play a soft melody, a song that spoke of lost hopes and forgotten dreams. The chords echoed through the park, mixing with the sound of children's laughter and the buzz of adults. Some, as they passed, gave them looks of pity, while others simply ignored their presence. Jack's gaze, however, was focused on the music. For him, each note was a way to escape the harsh reality that surrounded him. As it played, Jack closed his eyes for a moment, allowing the music to wash over him. He didn't care about the coins that fell beside him, but about the freedom that music gave him. People might pass by without noticing, but deep down in his being, he knew there was still a part of him that dreamed of being heard, not just as a beggar, but as an artist. It was then that a childish giggle broke his concentration. Jack opened his eyes and saw a little girl of approximately 8 years old sitting on a nearby bench. Her face was lit up with a genuine smile, and her eyes sparkled with a curiosity Jack hadn't seen in a long time. The little one was called Emily, and she seemed completely mesmerized by the music he played. Jack, surprised by the attention, felt an indescribable warmth spread through his chest. The music that was once just an escape now seemed to be a bond that united them. "Hey, you play very well," Emily exclaimed, holding a small teddy bear in her lap. Jack smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his weathered face. "Thank you, little girl. What are you doing here alone?" "I'm not alone. I have my bear, Teddy," replied Emily, lifting the toy as if it were a great achievement. "But I wanted to hear you play. Your music is beautiful." "You like music, then?" Jack asked, his voice carrying a hint of curiosity. "Yes, I love it. My mother always says that music makes people happy. And you look happy when you play," she said, nodding enthusiastically. Jack felt a lump form in his throat. No one had noticed the beauty of his music in this way for years. "I'm glad you like it. Music can be a friend, you know? She is always here to listen to me." Emily looked at him, tilting her head, as if taking in every word. "Do you have other songs? Can you play one more?" "Of course. I'm going to play a song that talks about freedom," Jack said, adjusting the guitar and starting to play a more upbeat melody. The little girl began to shake her head and clap her hands, delighted. The connection between them seemed to transcend their age difference and Jack's situation. The park, which previously seemed indifferent, was now full of life. People started to stop, attracted by the music. Jack felt reinvigorated, playing with more passion, immersed in the energy Emily brought. He looked at her and saw that her expression was one of pure joy. That little girl had the power to bring out the most beautiful things in him. However, this magical connection was abruptly severed. A well-dressed woman with an authoritative air appeared next to Emily. His eyes were cold, and his expensive clothes contrasted with Jack's simplicity. "Emily, it's time for us to go. We can't be late," the woman said, pulling the girl by the arm. Emily looked at Jack, her eyes expressing a mixture of disappointment and confusion. "But Mom, I was enjoying it so much. He plays so well." The little girl tried to protest, but her mother ignored her, dragging her away. "Sorry, little girl," Jack murmured, his heart heavy. He stopped playing, watching the little girl being carried away as the joy that had filled the air quickly disappeared. Emily's smile was replaced by an expression of discontent, but the woman continued on her way, oblivious to what she was causing. Jack felt empty. What had started as a moment of connection and hope had now turned into yet another bitter reminder of their reality. He looked at the guitar in his hands, as if he too was sad. The song seemed to have lost its meaning at that moment. He slowly stood up, putting away the instrument, wishing the moment hadn't ended. With the sun beginning to set, turning the sky orange and pink, Jack left the park, feeling the weight of loneliness again. He knew life on the streets was tough, but a little girl's friendship could have brought a little light to his darkness. What he didn't know was that that encounter had only begun to shape what was to come, an outcome that would challenge not only his dignity, but also the very structure of the city where he lived. The next day, Jack returned to the park with a mixture of anxiety and hope. The sun shone brightly, as if the day was trying to offer him a new chance. He sat in his usual spot, the guitar resting on his knee, and began to play a new melody. The music that came from its strings was soft and nostalgic, reflecting the longing he felt for Emily, the little girl who had stopped to listen to him the day before. In his mind, he relived her smile, her eyes bright and full of curiosity. People passed by, some giving carefree glances, while others stopped for a few moments, attracted by the melody that echoed through the park. Jack realized that, even in the crowd, Emily's absence left a void in his heart. He tried hard to play with more passion, as if every note was a letter meant for her. Deep down, he knew that the connection he had felt with the girl was unique, something that wasn't seen every day on the cold, impersonal streets. As he played, his thoughts wandered, remembering the way Emily had looked at him, as if he were an important part of her life. Maybe I should compose a song for her, he thought, interrupting the song and starting a new one, lighter and full of hope. He closed his eyes, letting the chords flow, creating a melody that brought out the innocence of childhood, the joy that comes from small moments. Suddenly, he heard the sound of familiar footsteps, and when he opened his eyes, he saw Emily standing in front of him, alone. His heart leapt with joy and relief. The little girl looked even more radiant in the sunlight, with her hair blowing in the wind and a smile that lit up her face. "Hi, Jack," she said, in a sweet, excited voice. "I came back to hear you play." Jack smiled, feeling deeply touched. "Hi, Emily. I'm glad you came. You inspired me to write a new song." "For real? About me?" She looked at him with an expression of pure curiosity, her eyes shining. "Yes," he replied, adjusting the guitar on his lap. "It's a song about friendship and how music can connect us, even when we're in different places." Emily sat on the bench next to him, leaning forward, interested. "Can you play for me?" "Of course." Jack began to play the new melody, and the music flowed with lightness and joy. While playing, Jack decided it was time to share some of his story. He paused the music and said, "You know, Emily, I used to have a different life. I had a home, a job, friends, but things changed, and now I'm here. But music has always been what kept me happy." Emily looked at him with a mixture of empathy and concern. "Why don't you have a house anymore?" Jack hesitated for a moment, but the sincerity in the girl's eyes made him open up. "Sometimes life can be difficult. Some people lose everything they have for different reasons. But I try to find joy in music. It's like a friend to me." The little girl reflected for a moment. "I'd like to help you find a house again. What can I do?" Jack laughed softly, touching her head tenderly. "You're already doing a lot just by being here and listening to my music. The support of a friend like you is worth more than you know." Emily smiled, her eyes shining with hope. "So I'll listen to you whenever I can. And if you want, I can bring you a snack next time. My mom always takes me to the park for something to eat." "That would be wonderful," Jack replied, feeling touched by the girl's generosity. Music and a snack together. What a delicious combination. They continued talking, and Jack told stories about his music, about how each song had a story behind it. Emily listened intently, asking questions and laughing at the funny parts. Time seemed to fly by, and the connection between them grew every second. It was then that, suddenly, the figure of Margaret, Emily's mother, appeared, interrupting the moment. She approached quickly, her stern gaze fixed on Jack. "Emily, what are you doing here?" "Come on, we need to go," Margaret said, pulling her daughter by the arm in a hurry. "But Mom, I was listening to Jack play. He's a really good musician," Emily protested, trying to free herself. Margaret didn't seem willing to listen. "This is no time for that. Come on now." She looked at Jack with disdain, as if the mere fact that he was there was an insult. "I don't want you to stick around, understand?" Jack felt his heart sink. He knew he couldn't compete with a mother's authority, but the pain in his expression didn't go unnoticed by Emily. "Please, Mom," Emily insisted, looking at Jack. "He's my friend." Margaret ignored her daughter's plea and continued to pull her, while Emily struggled to return a look of encouragement to Jack. He wanted to say something, but the words stuck in his throat. He felt helpless, as if he could do nothing to protect this fragile friendship. "I'm sorry, Jack," Emily whispered, as she was dragged away. "I'll be back." The last vision Jack saw was of the little girl looking back as she walked away, a look of worry and sadness on her face. The music that once sounded so free and full of life now felt heavy and distant. He sat in silence, the guitar on his lap, feeling loneliness invade his chest. The connection he had formed with Emily was precious, but the barriers society imposed seemed insurmountable. As the sun began to set, Jack took a deep breath, trying to chase away the sadness. "I can't give up," he thought to himself. "I need to find a way to connect with her again." He looked out at the park, thinking about how music could be the bridge between their very different worlds. And so, amid the pain of separation, a new determination began to blossom within him. Jack walked through the city's dusty streets, his mind buzzing with questions. He remembered the little girl who had stopped to listen to his music, the way her eyes sparkled with joy and curiosity. However, this joy soon turned to a heavy heart as he thought of his mother, Margaret, and the project she was about to launch, a project that threatened not only his life, but those of many others who, like him, lived on the streets. Determined to better understand the situation, he decided to speak to a friend who knew the ins and outs of the city well, a man called Leo, who had a vast network of contacts among the homeless. That afternoon, the sun was hiding behind dark clouds, and Jack headed to the corner where Leo usually spent his time. He found his friend leaning against an old wall, watching the cars passing by, an expression of discontent on his face. Leo, a man with shaggy hair and an unshaven beard, was known for his stories and information about the city. When she saw Jack, a smile formed on her lips. "Hey, Jack," greeted Leo, standing up and extending his hand. "What brings you here?" Jack hesitated for a moment, looking into Leo's eyes, which were full of understanding. He took a deep breath and, in a firm voice, said, "I need to know more about Margaret, the mother of that little girl, Emily. What can you tell me about her?" Leo frowned thoughtfully. He knew that Margaret was an influential figure in the city, but he was hesitant to share information. "Look, Jack," began Leo with a serious tone, "Margaret is not just a businesswoman. She is one of the most powerful people in the city. It is behind many real estate projects that changed the face of our community. And from what I hear, she's about to start a big project that will demolish the area where many of us used to hang out." Those words hit Jack like a blow. His heart raced, and he felt a wave of despair. He didn't want to believe that the little girl who had brought a little light into his life was linked to something so destructive. "Are you sure?" Jack asked, his voice breaking. "What will happen to the people who live here?" "The truth is that they don't care," Leo replied bitterly. "For them, we are invisible, just numbers on a financial statement. If the project goes ahead, a lot of people will lose their homes, and those who don't have a place to go, well, you know how that ends." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. He thought about everyone he knew, the life stories, the forgotten dreams, and the connection he had made with Emily. It was impossible to let that happen. He needed to do something, but what? His gaze fixed on Leo, searching for an answer. "What can I do?" he asked, already knowing that there would be no easy answer. Leo looked at Jack, his eyes reflecting the pain of someone who had already fought countless battles. "To fight, you need to make noise. Get together with others and show them we have a voice. Music has always been a form of protest, hasn't it? Use this to your advantage." Jack nodded, understanding. He needed to find a way to join the others. Music could be their weapon, a cry of resistance against the oppression that was about to fall upon them. In the following days, Jack began to meet with other homeless people, sharing their stories and forming a bond of solidarity. They talked about the importance of community, about the need to be heard and seen. Jack used his guitar to compose songs that talked about their lives, their hopes, and what was at stake. Every note, every letter was a manifesto, a call to action. Meanwhile, at home, Emily drew. With colored pencils in hand, she sat at her living room table and created images that reflected what she loved most. One of his drawings was of Jack playing the guitar, with sunlight illuminating his face. To her, Jack was more than just a musician. He was a friend, someone who understood your joy and sadness. That connection I felt for him was inexplicable, a mix of admiration and affection. Why doesn't Mom like him? Emily thought as she colored in the details of the drawing. She didn't understand why her mother would oppose someone so kind and talented. Every time he was with Jack, he felt a happiness he couldn't explain. His music made her dream, and his presence made her more alive. That afternoon, while drawing, she decided she needed to talk to her mother about Jack. With the drawing in hand, she approached Margaret, who was in her living room, analyzing documents related to the real estate project. His mother's expression was serious, like whenever she was busy with work. "Mommy," Emily called, with a sweet and innocent voice. Margaret looked up, a little surprised, but quickly returned her attention to what she was doing. "What is it, dear?" "I'm very busy right now." Emily hesitated, looking at the drawing she held. She wanted her mother to see what she had done, but she also wanted to understand why there was so much resistance towards Jack. "I made a drawing of a friend. It's from Jack, the musician who plays in the park. He is very good," Emily said, trying to hide the anxiety in her voice. Margaret frowned, interrupting her thoughts about the project. A look of disapproval crossed his face. "Emily, you shouldn't get involved with people like him. He's not like us. These people are complicated." "But he's so kind," Emily replied, with an insistence that surprised even herself. "He makes me feel happy. Why can't you see this?" Margaret sighed, realizing the conversation was taking a turn she hadn't expected. The last thing she wanted was to argue about her values with her daughter. "It's not about not seeing, darling. It's about what's best for you. Those people have nothing to offer." Emily, feeling frustration building inside her, decided she wasn't going to give up. She lifted the drawing and showed it to her mother. "Look, I want you to meet Jack. He is special." Margaret looked at the drawing and felt a pang of guilt. Emily's expression was one of hope, and for a moment, she saw the purity in her daughter's intention. But soon, the reality of her social position and her responsibilities as a mother came flooding back. "I can't, Emily. You need to understand that the world is complicated. Don't mix with these people, please." Emily, disappointed, left the room, feeling that her voice was worthless. At that moment, she realized that the adult world was full of rules that didn't make sense. What she wanted most was to see Jack smile, to feel the music vibrating around her. Meanwhile, Jack continued to play, his chords echoing across the city, a melody of hope amidst the chaos. Unaware that the connection he had created with Emily was just beginning to unfold into something much greater. Jack walked through the city's busy streets, his mind full of doubts and worries. He had decided to face Margaret, the mother of the little girl who brightened his days with her smile. His heart was beating fast in his chest, and the feeling that he was about to take a decisive step made him hesitate. With his guitar in tow, he headed toward Margaret's company's imposing headquarters, a glass building that reflected the sunlight in an almost blinding glow. It was there, in that place, that he hoped to meet the woman who, without knowing it, could change the course of his life and his community. As he entered the lobby, Jack felt small and insignificant. The decor was modern and luxurious, the kind of atmosphere he had only known from the pages of magazines. He approached the receptionist, a young woman with perfectly coiffed hair and elegant attire, and, in a trembling voice, announced, "Hello, I would like to speak to Mrs. Margaret, please." The receptionist looked at him with a disdainful expression, quickly sizing him up. The look in her eyes sent a clear message. He didn't belong there. You need to schedule a meeting, sir. You can't just walk in here and expect to be served. She replied, with a tone of voice that bordered on disdain. Jack felt a lump form in his throat. He wanted to scream, to say that he was a human being, that he had a story, a life, but the words wouldn't come out. Instead, he took a defeated step back and left the building, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. Back at the park, Jack sat on his usual bench. He looked around. People continued their lives, oblivious to his suffering. He picked up the guitar and started playing a song that spoke of struggle and hope. The notes echoed through the air, full of emotion, as if he was pouring everything he felt into that melody. As he gave himself over to the music, he didn't notice that Emily was watching from afar. The little girl, with her summer blouse and hair flowing in the wind, stood transfixed as she listened to the soft notes he made. The music seemed to touch her soul, and without thinking twice, she approached, attracted by the melody. "Hi, Jack," Emily exclaimed, her eyes shining with joy. "Your music is beautiful." He stopped playing and looked at the girl, an involuntary smile appearing on his face. It was as if her presence illuminated his dark world. "Thank you, Emily. I'm glad you're here," he replied, his voice still choked with emotion. "What are you doing?" "I was having a picnic with my friends," she said, shaking her head. "But I couldn't stop listening to you play. It's so beautiful." Jack thought about how refreshing her innocence was. The little girl, with her vibrant energy, seemed to be the only one who truly cared about him. "You know, Emily, music is a way of telling stories," he explained while adjusting the guitar strings. "Each song has something to say, something that comes from the bottom of the heart." Emily sat next to him, attentive and admiring. "Can you tell me a story now?" she asked, her eyes wide with expectation. He hesitated for a moment. What could he tell a child? However, Jack decided to let spontaneity speak louder. Once there was a man who lived in a place where the stars seemed brighter than anywhere else. He played the guitar every night and the stars danced to his music. One day, he met a little girl who also loved music. He stopped, looking at Emily, who was listening to him attentively. This little girl brought light to his life, and together they dreamed of making the world a better place. Emily smiled, her eyes shining with joy. "And they did it?" she asked anxiously. "Well, that part of the story is still being written," Jack replied, looking at the horizon, as if he was visualizing the future. "But they have hope, and hope is very powerful." The conversation was interrupted when Margaret appeared, with her stern expression and domineering posture. She quickly approached, pulling Emily by the arm, and the little girl looked at Jack with a mix of sadness and confusion. "Emily, what are you doing here?" said Margaret with a tone of reproach. "You shouldn't be talking to this man." Jack felt a wave of indignation rise, but he knew he couldn't confront her there. "Mom, I was just listening to him play the guitar." Emily tried to justify it, but her mother wasn't willing to listen. "It doesn't matter. Let's go now," Margaret replied, pulling her daughter tightly. "Wait," Jack interrupted, his voice firm. "I just wanted to talk. Music is a language that everyone can understand." Margaret turned to him, her eyes full of disdain. "Your music has no place here. You should know that this is a space for people who have something to contribute to society, not for people like you." The last sentence cut Jack like a blow. He wanted to protest, but words failed him. He felt small, powerless in front of that woman who, with a simple look, dismantled his dignity. "Mom, please," Emily begged, looking at her mother with big, teary eyes. "He's my friend." But Margaret was in no mood to listen. With a sharp pull, she took her daughter away, leaving Jack there, surrounded by the echo of the music that still resonated in his mind, but now filled with sadness. After mother and daughter disappeared into the crowd, Jack sat back down on his bench, head bowed. He felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, a burden he didn't know if he could bear. He picked up the guitar and started playing a new song, a melody that spoke of loneliness and lost hope. As the chords floated through the air, Jack realized the fight was just beginning. He couldn't give up, not now. The connection he had created with Emily was too strong to ignore. And even though the battle against Margaret seemed impossible, he was determined to find a way. He looked up at the sky, where the clouds were beginning to disperse, letting some light through. And as he played, an idea began to germinate in his mind. Maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to fight for what he believed in. Music could be his weapon, and he was prepared to use it. The sun shone brightly in the sky, illuminating the park where children played. Couples walked hand in hand and people gathered to enjoy the day. In the center of all this commotion, Jack stood in a corner of the lawn, his guitar in hand, ready to play. He was not just a beggar. He was an artist, a storyteller through his songs. The aroma of the approaching picnic of roasting sausages and fruit juices made his stomach growl. But his mind was focused on the music, on the connection he had found with Emily. Children gathered around him, attracted by the melody that flowed from his strings. He started playing a happy song, one that talked about freedom and hope. Emily, with her flowery dress and hair tied in 2 braids, not only watched, but danced, her little feet jumping to the beat of the music. The other children soon joined her, creating a small dance circle around Jack. He smiled, playing with more passion, each note echoing like a call to happiness. "Look, it's my musician friend," Emily shouted, her clear voice cutting through the music. The children applauded. Jack looked at her, his heart warmed by the impromptu performance. He was far from the famous artist he once dreamed of being. But there, in that moment, surrounded by laughter and joy, he felt like the king of the world. Margaret, watching from a distance, felt her heart sink. Her face was stiffened into an expression of displeasure. The image of her daughter, so happy and free, contrasted sharply with what she considered a stigma on her reputation. For Margaret, Jack's presence at that picnic was a threat. She could not allow her family's image to be associated with a man who lived on the streets. It was a question of status, of appearance. And for her, appearance was everything. "Emily!" Margaret shouted, her authoritative tone cutting through the joy of the moment. The children stopped dancing, and Jack felt the atmosphere change instantly. "Let's go now." The look of despair on Emily's face made Jack's heart shatter. He tried to understand the gravity of the situation, but the child seemed so lost between his love for music and his mother's pressure. "But Mommy, I want to stay. He's my friend," Emily protested, her eyes shining with tears. "We don't have time for that. Come," Margaret insisted, quickly approaching and pulling her daughter's hand. Jack, unable to remain silent, decided to intervene. "Wait," he called, getting up from the floor and approaching Margaret. The sun cast a golden light on him, making his thin figure appear even more vulnerable. "I just want her to know that this is a safe place. Everyone has a right to be here, including me." Margaret turned to Jack, anger boiling in her eyes. "You don't belong here. You are an inconvenience, a problem that must be solved. This area is not made for people like you." Jack felt the provocation in her words, but he didn't let it get him down. "And who decides who belongs here? I have as much right to be here as you do. My life may not be like yours, but that doesn't make me any less human." The children, intrigued by the discussion, moved away a little, forming a small circle around the clash. Emily, with an anguished look, tried to understand the situation. "Mommy, it's not fair. He just wanted to play music. He is good and makes people happy." The little girl was clearly torn between her love for her mother and the friendship she had formed with Jack. "Calm down, darling," Margaret replied, trying to contain her frustration. "You don't understand. He's a distraction, and I can't allow you to get involved with people like that. Let's go now." She pulled Emily again, but the girl resisted. "No, Mommy, please," Emily begged, tears finally streaming down her face. "I like him. He is my friend." "You must listen to your mother, little girl," Jack said, his voice quiet but firm. "I don't want to be a problem for you, but I am a person, and I deserve respect and dignity. I'm not just a beggar, and you can't just ignore me." Margaret looked at Jack, a mixture of contempt and anger in her gaze. "You don't know who you're dealing with," she said, her voice low and threatening. "I won't let you ruin my daughter's life." "To spoil?" "I'm trying to show her that music and friendship are more important than any real estate project or social status," Jack exclaimed, feeling his frustration boil over. "Life is much more than appearance, and I am much more than the clothes I wear." Margaret, overcome with indignation, turned to Emily, who was standing, her eyes full of tears. "He arrives. Let's go." The woman began to pull her away, ignoring her daughter's pleas. "I don't want to go, Mommy. I want to be with him," Emily screamed, but her mother didn't relent. Jack stood there, feeling his heart break as he saw the little girl taken away, her eyes pleading for help. "Emily," he called, but the girl was already at a distance that made it impossible to hear. The image of her, so sad and confused, was engraved in his mind, and he felt helpless, as if all his struggle had been in vain. With the picnic interrupted and the music silenced, sadness filled the air. The children scattered, and Jack, once again alone in the crowd, sat on the floor, his guitar on his lap, the melody that once brought joy now sounding like a lament. He looked around. The park that once seemed vibrant was now enveloped in a heavy silence. "Why does it have to be like this?" he muttered to himself, as the gentle breeze caressed his face. Jack knew that the fight was not just for him, but for Emily and for all the people who, like him, were invisible in the eyes of society. He wanted to show her that music could be a refuge, a safe haven amid the storm of life. But at that moment, everything seemed lost. Jack, with his heart pounding in his chest and renewed determination, decided he could no longer be at the mercy of what Margaret and her real estate project planned to do. He knew the fight wouldn't be easy, but the thought of losing not only his dignity, but also the bond he had built with Emily, motivated him to act. So he began to meet with other homeless people, those who, like him, lived in the shadow of society's indifference. They discussed an audacious plan: organize a musical performance in the park, an event that would not only raise their voices but also draw attention from the media and, perhaps, the community. The days that followed were intense preparation. With the help of some friends, Jack managed to gather instruments and create a small repertoire. Energy and hope began to blossom among the homeless, who united around music and the idea of resistance. On the day of the presentation, the park was full of people. Many gathered curiously, attracted by the music and the vibrant spirit of unity that emanated from that group. Jack took the lead, his guitar in hand and a gleam of hope in his eyes. He began playing a melody that talked about freedom and struggle, while the others joined him in an improvised choir. The music reverberated through the air, and people passing by stopped to listen. The atmosphere was charged with emotion, and many began to join the circle, applauding and encouraging the musicians. "Look, Mom, it's the man with the guitar," exclaimed Emily, who was among the crowd. The little girl was accompanied by a reporter who had met her at school and remembered the story of her friendship with Jack. The reporter, intrigued, decided to follow the little girl, certain that there was a valuable story behind that connection. Upon seeing Jack, Emily's heart skipped a beat. She felt a mixture of joy and worry, knowing that her mother disapproved of that type of interaction, but the love she felt for Jack was stronger. Jack saw Emily in the crowd, and for a moment, his heart warmed. He knew she was the daughter of the woman behind it all, but at that moment, she was just the little girl who made him believe in the beauty of friendship. He continued playing, dedicating the song to her without knowing that, at that exact moment, the reporter was starting to record everything. Jack's music echoed through the park, capturing the essence of the fight for the dignity and rights of those who live on the margins of society. When the performance ended, applause echoed throughout the space. Jack was panting, but his spirits were high. He looked into the crowd and saw Emily running towards him. The little girl was radiant, her eyes sparkling with wonder. "You were amazing, Jack," said Emily, jumping for joy. "I knew you could do it." "Thanks, little one," replied Jack with a genuine smile. "But that was just the beginning. We need to keep fighting." The reporter, who had heard the entire conversation, approached. "Hi, I'm Sarah. Can I ask you a few questions about what happened here today? Jack hesitated for a moment, but the sincerity in Emily's eyes encouraged him to speak. Of course, what would you like to know? Could you tell me about what motivated you to get together and make this presentation? What does this mean for you? Sarah asked as she readied her camera. Jack took a deep breath and responded. We are here to show that we are human, that we have voices, and that we will not be ignored. This song is for all of us who fight every day to have a place in the world. Emily looked at Jack in awe. She felt that her friendship with him was more than just a passing connection. It was a true mission of empathy and understanding. As Jack spoke, the reporter recorded, the story beginning to unfold before her. After the interview, Sarah decided it was time to reveal something important. Emily, did you know that your father is a lawyer who defends social causes? I think he could help. Emily's eyes lit up. Serious? Could he help Jack? Yes, if you talk to him. I believe he would be interested in hearing about the situation. Your mother may not understand, but your father can make a difference. Emily nodded, determined. I'll talk to him as soon as I get home. With determination in her eyes, she said goodbye to Jack. I'll be back soon, I promise. As Emily walked away, Jack felt a mix of hope and anxiety. He knew the situation wouldn't be easy, but the connection he had created with that little girl seemed to be a light in the darkness. The fight was just beginning, but he felt that with the help of the community and Emily, there was a real chance to change things. In the days that followed, the story of Jack's presentation gained attention in the media. Sarah did an excellent job covering the event, and soon other journalists began to take an interest in the story. Jack became a symbol of resistance, and the community began to rally around him. He received invitations to play at charity events, and his music began to resonate further than he had ever imagined. Meanwhile, Margaret found herself in an uncomfortable position. The project she had planned, now threatened by community mobilization and Jack's growing popularity, began to be publicly questioned. Pressure increased when a report detailing the consequences of the project for homeless people aired, and social media filled with support for Jack and his cause. Finally, the day came when Emily's father, a socially conscious and respected lawyer, decided to reunite with Jack. He was impressed by the passion and resilience of the man his daughter admired so much. During the meeting, they discussed legal strategies to stop Margaret's real estate project. Jack, I want to help. Her story touched me deeply, and not just because I'm Emily's father. Everyone deserves a safe place to live, the lawyer said, as Jack listened intently, his heart pounding. Thank you for being here. This means everything to me and everyone who lives in this community, Jack responded, feeling hope well up in his heart. With his lawyer's support, Jack's fight quickly gained momentum. They organized a large demonstration, where Jack and other homeless people gathered to show their resistance. Emily was there, holding a sign that said, "Music and dignity for all." Beside her, her father, the lawyer, was preparing to speak in defense of the community. The event attracted media attention and community support was overwhelming. Jack took the stage and, with guitar in hand, began playing the song that had become the anthem of that fight. The voices of the crowd joined his, and in that moment, everyone was one voice, calling for dignity and respect. Pressure mounted on Margaret, and her reputation began to crumble as the community rallied against the project. Finally, at a public hearing, Emily's lawyer presented the evidence and voices of the community, and Margaret's proposal was blocked. Jack, alongside Emily, felt that he had regained not only the dignity he thought he had lost, but also a meaningful place in the world. He was no longer just a beggar. He was a musician, a friend, and a community advocate. Margaret, on the other hand, was unable to recover from the scandal. Her reputation was tarnished, and she found herself isolated in her own fortress. The project he had so longed for fell apart, and Jack, with the help of Emily and the community, was finally able to dream of a better future. The friendship between Jack and Emily grew stronger, and together they continued to fight for everyone's dignity. Jack, now invited to play at charity events, has found a new purpose in his music. The melody that was once a way to escape loneliness has become an anthem of hope and change. And so, Amid musical notes and laughter, Jack's life was transformed, showing that, even in the most difficult situations, friendship and music can be powerful forces of change.